And now, marine weather around Alaska. Welcome aboard to our new YouTube channel. This is a way for you to view the marine weather that you've been accustomed to. The difference is now the weather segments will be broken out into separate components, so you'll be able to view the public or general Alaska weather separately from the aviation and the marine weather. And we start out with the sea ice. The ice continues to slowly melt here up along the Arctic coast, and we expect this as we go through the summer season. Open water is really developing now through the lower Chukchi Sea and generally south of the Bering Strait. The far northern Bering Sea is open at this point. And looking at the marine weather on Sunday for the southeast panhandle, the inner channels, winds will be around 10 knots. Look for a northwest wind south of Stevens Passage there toward Dixon Entrance with waves of 2 feet around Ketchikan and Metlakatla. Further north, Stevens Passage, Lynn Canal, 10 knot south to southeast winds with waves a foot or 2. For the outer coast, nearshore waters within 15 nautical miles, we expect 10 knot winds with a generally a southeasterly component here north of Craig up through Gustavus at 10 to 15 knots, and then turning a little more easterly there west of Yakutat. Waves generally running right around 4 feet on Sunday. And then for Monday, similar conditions here in through the inner channels. South winds to 10 knots, Stevens Passage on up through Lynn Canal with waves a foot or 2. Northwest winds 10 knots, Dixon Entrance with waves a couple of feet. And then for the outer coastal areas, including the southeastern Gulf, we expect winds to be onshore, west-southwest, south of Gustavus at 10 to 15 knots with waves running right around 4 or 5 feet. And then winds will be a bit stronger west of Yakutat toward Cape Suckling, east winds at 30 knots and waves around 5-6 feet. Strongest winds will be associated with a frontal system lifting northeastward across the Alaska Peninsula up through Kodiak Island. So ahead of it, gale force winds of 40 to 45 knots are expected there at the entrance of Cook Inlet with waves running around 10-11 feet. For Prince William Sound, winds generally out of the east at 15 knots with 3-foot waves, and then through upper and middle Cook Inlet, northeast winds 20 to 25 knots with waves running right around 4 or 5 feet. Monday, winds will come down at least through the entrance of Cook Inlet. Look for southeast to east winds at 20 to 25 knots with waves 5 to 6 feet. Southeast winds 20 knots off the Kenai Peninsula coastline. Easterly winds to 20 knots there in Prince William Sound. Waves bumping upwards of 4 feet in areas south of Cordova and west of Cape Suckling. We're looking at east winds to 30 knots with 8-foot waves. And then across Kodiak Island on Sunday, winds will be out of the southeast to east 25 to 30 knots. But as we go down the length of the Alaska Peninsula and get away from that front near a weakening area of low pressure, winds fall off to easterly at about 15 to 20 knots. Waves on the North Pacific side 5-6 feet. And 3 to maybe as much as 4 or 5 feet there north of Cold Bay. Highest waves will be in and around surrounding Kodiak Island. For Monday, the winds will continue to come downward, southeast to east winds at 20 knots around Kodiak Island, and then look for even lighter variable winds around 10 knots before turning southerly at 15 knots toward the end there of the peninsula. Waves generally running 3 to 5 feet on the North Pacific side and a foot or 2 on the Bering side. Across the Aleutians, north to northwest winds, eastern central Aleutians 20 to 25 knots. Waves generally running 4 to as high as 8 feet in the gap there between Atka and Nikolsky, and 6 to as high as 9 feet there through the eastern half of the Aleutians on the Bering side. And then come Monday, another low pressure system will be passing just south of the western half of the Aleutians. So ahead of it, winds are going to turn south to southeast, picking up to 30 knots west of Nikolsky, and then eventually turning northerly on the backside of the low way out toward Kiska and Shimmy at 25 knots. Waves will build from a few feet there toward the eastern Aleutians to as high as 8 feet on the North Pacific side, and as much as, say, 8 to 12 feet west of Adak. Along areas of the southwest coast, winds northeast out of Norton Sound and the lower Yukon Delta 15 to 20 knots. Easterly flow out of Kuskokwim and Bristol Bays 20 to 25 knots with waves there 2 to 4 feet. And on Monday, we expect winds across the region to become more east to southeasterly, 15 to 20 knots in a broad sense, and waves generally running 2 to 3 feet off of the coastline. Variable winds around 10 knots at St. Paul and St. George with waves there 2 to 3 feet. Along the Arctic coast, We expect winds to be out of the east at 20 knots on Sunday, and some ice may shift around with that, but coming down through the Bering Strait, winds kind of go south and back toward the northeast out of Kotzebue Sound, and then northerly down through the strait and on the north side of St. Lawrence Island, with waves running 2 to 3 feet in the open waters there of the lower Chukchi Sea. And for Monday, east winds continue along the Arctic coast, Kaktovik through Utqiagvik, 15 to 20 knots. Those winds turn northeasterly off of Point Ley and Cape Lisburne, but then turn more southerly in the low end there, north side of the Bering Strait at 20 knots, waves running around 4 feet in the lower Chukchi Sea. And then across areas below the strait, east winds out of Norton Sound, and on the north side of St. Lawrence Island, generally running 10 to 15 knots, with waves running right around 2 to 3 feet. And again, you can always find us here on this new YouTube channel. Share it with your friends and family at NWS Alaska, and we'll continue to post all of these changes here with a little more time to explain things as needed. So it makes it a little easier for us than in the past. We had specific deadlines that we had to get the marine and aviation segments done in 5 minutes. This time I can spend a little bit more time and try and emphasize a few areas. So thank you for watching.